welcome to another episode of Speaking of Gothic. And today I want to talk about houses and the supernatural. There's lots of movies out there that feature Gothic tropes, as I've talked about before in this program, of course. And one of the main ones are movies that feature some sort of house that as the central figure, whether that is some sort of ghost presence in the house itself as a living entity, like in Crimson Peak, or some sort of demonic possession, which I don't really like to cover demonic stuff anyway. But so today, hopefully just in time for Halloween, we're going to talk about houses and the supernatural. And I made a list of movies, and I'm looking this way because I'm on my second screen over here. I made a list of movies that I like that feature a house in this sort of category that has all the Gothic tropes. And I'm starting from the 60s and I'm going all the way up through last year or this year or whatever it is. So bear with me. And I'm certain, some of these, I'm going to try to talk about them just briefly because there's a lot of movies on this list. So I don't want to take a whole bunch of time, but these are movies that you can check out if you have an inkling to. But the ones that I really like, I'll probably say a little bit more about them. All right. So starting out with House of Usher from 1960. And this was based on the classic story, The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and directed by the legendary filmmaker Roger Corman. If you don't know who Roger Corman is, Google him, because this guy made, hundreds of movies on super low budgets. And he also brought up a lot of filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola, and actors like Jack Nicholson worked with him, etc. And in this thriller, it features Richard Price as Roger Usher, and he's a man who believes his family is cursed to incurable madness. This is obviously based on the short story by Edgar Allan Poe. If you haven't read it, check it out. Great story, great movie, great adaptation of it. It's great. And I think all those Roger Corman adaptations of Poe, I think it's Pit and the Pendulum, House of Usher, Mask of the Red Death, and I think there's another one. I can't remember what it is, but they're all great. They're all great. And, of course, now to modernize, it might be corny, but if you like that sort of Gothic, sort of overacting, just really in the Gothic tradition, that's definitely the movie for you. Here's another one, 1976, Burnt Offerings. Oliver Reed, who most people will know Oliver Reed. I know him from lots of different movies. He was actually in a werewolf movie called Werewolf of London, I think it was. And I knew him as playing Athos in The Three Musketeers and The Four Musketeers from Richard Lester. Excuse me. But most people know him as the slave merchant who owned the gladiators in the first Gladiator movie. So anyway, but basically, Ben, Oliver Reed, and Marianne Karen Black can't believe how cheap the rent is at their giant Victorian summer house. Basically, a bunch of stuff happens, and you just got to watch it, because I'm not going to give anything away. Oh, but this one also stars the great Bette Davis in it, so check it out. Another one from 1977, The Sentinel. Now, this is a creepy movie, I'm telling you right now. Premise is a New York City model with a troubled past decides to make some changes in her life, and then she goes to this house where she seems to be the only tenant, and there's a blind priest who is in the attic. And then she starts to realize that the building has some sort of evil presence. This is a creepy, creepy movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember being really creeped out by it. And I think it still holds up. Here's a classic, 1979, The Amityville Horror, starring James Brolin and Margot Kidder from Superman, played Lois Lane. And this is based on the book of the same name, The Amityville Horror. I read the book, terrified me. I read it. I shouldn't have read it. I was too young. And the movie, even though that they say now that the events might have been a hoax or something like that, I really haven't paid much attention to it over the years, but I'll just say that when I saw this movie, after having read the book, I was properly creeped out. And it's James Brolin, who's Josh Brolin's dad, but it's pretty great. Pretty great. The Changeling, now we're heading into the 80s. The Changeling, 1980. The composer John Russell, played by the late, great George C. Scott, who played Patton, if anybody knows that movie, is vacationing with his family when there's a car accident which kills his wife and daughter. And then basically he goes to grieve and he goes to this big house and all these things start happening. What I like about The Changeling is it's eerie. It's not really scary, but it's eerie. And then it also plays out like a mystery thriller. So I think I just watched that. I saw it when I was young, but then I rewatched it last year, and it still holds up. It's really good. Here's another one from 1980. Everybody should know this one. The Shining, starring Jack Nicholson. And Shelley Duvall and their son, Danny Lloyd. He plays Danny, and his name is Danny Lloyd. But basically, based on the Stephen King book, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Famously, Stephen King didn't like this adaptation. I like it. It's super creepy. If you've never seen it, excuse me, watch it again. But what I also like is, I didn't put it on here, but Dr. Sleep, because that movie doesn't take place around the house. But Stephen King wrote a novel, a sequel to The Shining, where he follows the adult Danny Torrance and how he's kind of drawn back into the Overlook Hotel, and he has to help this youngster. I didn't read all of the book because sometimes I have a hard time. Like, Stephen King's books are so long, but I saw the movie Dr. Sleep, written and directed by Mike Flanagan, who directed all the House of Usher and House on Haunted Hill, and some things I'm going to talk about later on. But anyway, great adaptation, and he kind of ties together Stephen King's book and the movie, and it feels very satisfying, super creepy. Love it. But anyway, The Shining, check it out if you haven't seen it. Here's another classic, and actually there's two. I'm going to put these kind of together. Evil Dead from 1981 and Evil Dead 2 from 1987. Basically, these people go to a cabin in the woods, and they open this book called the Necronomicon. And this is a movie that features Bruce Campbell. It's funny because his role is kind of small in the first movie, but Bruce Campbell plays his character named Ash. And in the second movie, which I think is the best of these sort of movies, it's just full on Evil Dead. They read from the book, which, that's stupid. You don't read from an evil book you find in the basement or the cellar. Come on now. It has all this demonic stuff on it, and people are like, oh, let's just read from the book. No, don't read from the book. Anyway. And it spawned another one. I love the third movie. And then obviously the Evil Dead was remade in 2013. Honestly, I've never seen that one. I heard great things about it. Directed by Fede Alvarez, who directed the recent Alien Romulus. I've not seen it, so that's why I didn't put it on my list, because I'm only putting movies on this list that I've seen. But honestly, if you're a fan of like those recent ones, go back and at least watch them just for, like nostalgia's sake. Go back and watch Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, which I think is the superior movie. All right. Poltergeist from 1982. And this is basically strange and creepy things start happening in this California house, and Craig T. Nelson, Jo Beth Williams, and then their kids, where ghosts are basically speaking to the smallest girl through the TV. And that's back in the day when TVs would actually sign off and there's nothing but static and white noise, and they would reach out. Great movie, still holds up. And the thing about it is that it was directed by Tobe Hooper, who directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but Steven Spielberg was a writer and producer on it. And then legend goes that he ghost directed the movie. I'll just say this. When I look at Tobe Hooper's resume, Salem's Lot, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, etc., I don't see Tobe Hooper on that movie. Maybe some scenes, but the music by John Williams, it just feels like Steven Spielberg directed it. I mean, when I look at that movie, I just say, oh, Steven Spielberg movie. I mean, I think anybody who's seen all his movies, they could just drop Poltergeist neatly into his category of movies, with the exception of the fact that it's a horror movie. But then again, Jaws is a horror movie. So make of that what you will, but Poltergeist, still definitely good. Worth checking out. Holds up very well. This next one is a horror comedy. It's called House 2 from 1987. And there's a man, Eric Gross, and his friend Jonathan Stark. And in Jonathan Stark, you probably know from, he played the vampire familiar in 1985 Fright Night. He was like the bad guy. He was like the slave to the master vampire, and he helped him out. But in this one, he's really, really funny. Excuse me. And basically, a man and his friend, they exhume an ancestor, in the house where his parents were killed. That's basically the plot. But this thing goes off the rails. I mean, it's one of the craziest movies I've ever seen. Now, there was another House movie. It's just called House. And I think it was probably like in 85 or 84. I don't remember exactly when it was. And it starred, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he was in this superhero TV show called The Greatest American Hero, I think it was called, where he can really fly and control his powers. I mean, it was corny. And the first movie was like a straight horror film about this Vietnam vet who experienced this stuff in this weird house. But this one is definitely a comedy. I mean, because you can, like, there's a baby dinosaur in it, I know, and a caveman and a glowing skull and a cowboy. It's nuts. But it's one of those things that you just kind of surrender to the campiness of it, then I think you'll like it. If you don't like campy things, I would stay away. But like, say, if you like Evil Dead 2 and the way that kind of goes campy, then maybe you'll like House. It's definitely not hard R like that. Not at all. There's no gore or anything, but it's still pretty cool. All right, here's a famous one, Beetlejuice. I'll say, yes, I know the sequel just came out, and one of my grandchildren absolutely loves it. She's a little goth girl. But, you know, I liked Beetlejuice. I like Tim Burton as a director. I like Johnny Depp and everybody else. And I love Winona Ryder, Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin back in the day. Michael Keaton, awesome actor. I enjoyed Beetlejuice, but it's not one I revisit. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you the last time I saw it. Maybe in the 90s. That's probably the last time I saw Beetlejuice. So, will I watch the sequel? If I'm really bored, I'll probably watch it. But the reason I put it on this list is because it is a haunted house, and I have seen it. And it's not my favorite. This would probably be like the lowest film on my list. But then again, these are just in order of year. So I had to include Beetlejuice. Now, this next one is one of my favorite films. I just love this film. It's called Stir of Echoes from 1999. Has the great Kevin Bacon in it. And if you've never seen this, basically, here's the premise. Blue-collar family man Tom scoffs at supernatural phenomenon until he lets his wife's sister put him in a hypnotic trance. Upon waking, Tom realizes he has a psychic connection with his son, who the little boy was cute, and he has alarming hallucinations of a missing teenager named Samantha. So basically, this was written, I think it was from a Richard Matheson short story, if I'm correct. And it was written by David Koepp, I think that's how you say his name, who I think he actually wrote Jurassic Park, and he wrote what's that movie? The one with the safe house with Jodie Foster and a little girl. I mean, he's a great writer, and turns out he's a pretty great director too. But this movie is amazing. I mean, if you've never seen Stir of Echoes, watch it, because it's got everything. Because it's got like the haunting stuff, it's got horror, it has suspense, and it has, like, you know, just the gothic nature of it. Kind of takes place during the winter time, and it's just a great film, so well crafted. And I gotta say, as usual, you know, Kevin Bacon acts the hell out of this thing. This is the movie that I love it so much. I mean, I bought it and I could watch it all the time. Love Stir of Echoes. All right, now we're in the 2000s, and here's a pretty cool movie. It's called What Lies Beneath from 2000, starring Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. And what I love about this movie, it's one of the rare movies that Harrison Ford plays a bad guy. I guess I shouldn't have even said that. I don't know. If you haven't seen it, well, you can kind of tell. I mean, he seems like a loving husband, but something happens. But you're going to be surprised, because when I saw this movie at the theater, I didn't know what to expect. And Michelle Pfeiffer, at first, I think the only problem with this movie, basically this wife, she's in this house with her husband, and he's kind of like gaslighting her, because, you know, she's experiencing some things and seeing things and finding things. And he's like, oh, honey, it's all in your mind, you know. And she seems very weak and submissive at first. So I think my first couple of viewings of it, I'm like, God, I kind of hate her character. I mean, like, you know, I wanted her to have more agency, and I wanted her like to do more. But it gets better. Stay with the movie. And then there's a heel turn in there with Harrison Ford, and you're just going to flip out, because, you know, he's Indiana Jones and Han Solo and everybody else, you know. I mean, so like when you see this movie, you're going to go, what? What? Yeah. So I absolutely love this movie, even if it's just for that. But like I said, the first part of the movie, even as they're building the mystery and the suspense, directed by Robert Zemeckis, who's a great director of all the Back to the Future movies and Forrest Gump, of course. But I promise you, stay with the movie, even if it kind of pisses you off about how they use her character. But then somewhere around the middle of the movie and then towards the end, it starts picking up steam, and then it's great. I mean, I absolutely love this movie. So check it out. All right. Here's another one, 2001, The Others. This is with Nicole Kidman. And basically she's a woman living with her 3 children in this English country home during World War II, and she's waiting for her husband to come home. Excuse me. Very religious, very protective of the children, and they have some sort of skin disease. And to say more would spoil this movie. It's one of the great ghost movies that came out in 2001. There's another one called The Orphanage, which is a Spanish film. I have not seen The Orphanage. I've only seen parts of The Orphanage, and it creeped me out. But I think this kind of stands up there with The Orphanage. But again, I didn't put The Orphanage on here because I've not seen The Orphanage. But this is a movie that once you've seen it, it's kind of like The Sixth Sense, where everything you've seen previously, you see in a whole new light. But again, I never spoil movies when I talk about things. So, and even if these movies have been out for years, like House of Usher in 1960, I'm not going to tell you what happens. I'm not going to spoil it. If you haven't seen it by now, I mean, we probably should spoil it, but I'm not going to do that here because I don't like spoilers. So watch The Others with an open mind. It's one of Nicole Kidman's great, best performances, and I think you will love it. Again, once you've seen the ending, you're just going to go, oh, wow. And then you're going to, what's great is you're going to start rethinking everything that happened during the film. And I love movies that do that. All right, here's one that a lot of people have seen. And this movie here spawned a bunch of sequels, which I think I've seen the second one, maybe, I don't know. Paranormal Activity from 2007. And basically about this couple, Katie and Micah, they kind of become disturbed in their house by something that seems to be a supernatural presence. And then this is a found footage film and probably one of the better ones. So then they film it, and then, events just go off the rails. But it's kind of a slow build. It's a super low budget. I think the guy made it for maybe $15,000. And then somehow Steven Spielberg saw it. I believe he watched it like in his office on a videotape or something, and it spooked him so much that he realized he had a winner. And then I think he worked with Jason Blum, and then they started distributing this thing out. And, obviously, it's a phenomenon. So, and it created just a whole slew of those movies. So I've never seen the rest of them. Part of number 2, I think. But Paranormal Activity, the first one, is pretty good, I have to say. All right, here's 2 more films. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but 1408 from this I think a Stephen King short story, I think it was. And it came out in 2007 and stars John Cusack, and he's an author, and he loves to debunk supernatural phenomenon. So then he checks into something called the Dolphin Hotel, and the manager, Samuel L. Jackson, tells him, like, hey, don't go there because it's a haunted room. But he does it anyway. And then it's just crazy what happens in that movie. I've never read the story, so I can't compare it, but it was eerie. Like after it ended, it just kind of stayed with me. I don't like movies that stay with me. I like to just watch them and forget them. But that one stayed with me. Same as the next one, because I've only seen this once, and I don't like anything about the devil, but I'm going to say House of the Devil, directed by Ty, oh my gosh, I can't remember his Ty West, I believe is his name, and he's actually the director who directed the trilogy with X, Pearl, and Maxine. Same director. Basically, this college student, she moves into this new apartment, and she takes a mysterious babysitting job, and I think it takes place. They never say exactly, but it seems to take place in the 80s, just based on the style, maybe early 80s. But basically, there isn't a child there, and the great Tom Noonan, he's at this house, and he says that they'll be watching the mother instead. But something horrible starts to happening to this lady, And it's really creepy. And again, I don't want to, it's another one of those movies that to say any more about it would just spoil the whole premise of the show. So House of the Devil by Ty West, 2009. Check it out. This was from 2012 called The Woman in Black. And this was Daniel Radcliffe's, I want to say it might have been his first or second major film after the Harry Potter franchise, I believe. And so he's trying to step out and like show he could be a real adult actor. And he's great in this. I mean, he's so good. But basically, I think it takes place in like the late 1800s. And he is a solicitor, which is a lawyer. And he's a recent widower, and he's grieving the loss of his wife. And he goes to this house to put their affairs in order. And of course, things are creepy, and things are creepy in the village. And you can tell there's some terrible secret. And there's this woman that he keeps seeing. And this is, oh my gosh, I know it's based on a book. And why do I think it was Shirley Jackson? Maybe. I don't know. I think maybe. There was also a BBC adaptation of this that came out in 1989. So the only place you can find that is on YouTube. I tried to watch it on YouTube, but the aspect ratio was off and it was very grainy. I was like, I can't even sit through this. I mean, it looked good, and I'm sure it had great production values. It's a BBC production from 89, but I couldn't watch it. But this one's really good. And the ending, oh my gosh, I'm just going to say I was devastated. I watched this like on a Saturday afternoon, just checking it out. And I was like, oh, okay, this is great. It's creepy. And the ending, I was almost sobbing. I was just like, what? No, what? So again, if you haven't seen this version with Daniel Radcliffe, watch it. You will not be disappointed. All right, here goes another one. I'm going to skim over this one really quick. The Conjuring from 2012. Supposedly true story from 1970. Based on the famed paranormal investigators, Lorraine and Ed Warren. And they go to this farmhouse to save this family called the Perrons, and they're experiencing some pretty horrifying events in their house. But obviously, Conjuring 2, Conjuring 3, blah, blah, blah. I've seen bits and pieces of the sequels, but that's a little bit too much for me. So I like this first one. I was suitably freaked out, and that's where it ended for me. Boom. All right, here, the next one. This one is a great, crazy movie, The Babadook, in 2014. Basically, about this single mother who she's plagued by the violent death of her husband, and she's battling with that. She's like in distress and she's grief. You can tell she's got PTSD. She kind of takes it out on her son. It's crazy. I think this movie is about grief and loss and how we can manifest things. And there's this, the kid finds this book. It's like a little storybook, and it has this creature called the Babadook, and it kind of feeds off your fear. And basically somehow he manifests the presence into real life. And so she's kind of battling for her child and for her own soul. It's a great movie. Seen it once. After that, nah, I'm out. All right, here's another film. We Are Still Here from 2015. And this is an independent film, I think, and written, directed by Ted Gogin. I'm not familiar with the name, but the main thing is that it stars the wonderful, the great, the amazing, the talented Barbara Crampton. Barbara, if you ever happen to just come across this podcast, I'm also a filmmaker, and I want to make a film with you for sure. I think you're amazing. So, and in this film, it's about these grieving parents, and they kind of find themselves the focus of angry, vengeful spirits. And if I'm correct, I remember that the ghosts in this were super cool because they looked like they were on fire. And I'd never seen that sort of look, so they were amazing. But this is a great film, great performance by Barbara Crampton. I can't even remember who else is in it, but awesome film. Check it out. Now we're at some of my favorites. Matter of fact, I'm going to jump around because I want to jump to I'll leave my favorite one for last. I'm going to jump to Evil Dead Rise from 2023. And that's where this woman, again, somehow they find the Necronomicon, and this is connected to all the other Evil Dead movies. And something interesting I liked about this movie, the movie for me, it was good. I thought it was a little bit too much gore over, story for me. I mean, yeah, they used a lot of blood, but I would have liked a little bit more substance. But what I did find fascinating about this movie was that this is the first time that they pointed out that there were 3 Necronomicons. And it was like, oh, so basically, I think it was like one Necronomicon book was influenced the events of like Ash and that strain. Oh, Ash versus the Evil Dead, by the way, Netflix series, a short-lived Netflix series. I think there was 3 seasons. It's hilarious and it fits totally into the Evil Dead world. But I think that Necronomicon was, I'll say like the Ash Necronomicon. I think the second Necronomicon was the one that was in Evil Dead 2013. And I think the third one was the one that was in this movie. If I'm remembering this correctly, because again, I saw it last year, but I think there was 3 Necronomicons. I think that kind of connected. And they didn't say that, but I'm just extrapolating that. So if you have any theories about the 3 Necronomicon books and you've seen Evil Dead Rise 2023, please put it in the comments. Tell me, because I'm pretty sure that those 3 books represented those 3 strains, like those 3 series. And I think I also read that the filmmaker of this film said as much. Anyway, excuse me. Yeah, pretty decent movie. Again, it wasn't my favorite, but I did like it. Here's a corny one. I know this is corny. Haunted Mansion from Disney 2023. It's so much better than the Eddie Murphy vehicle that was from like the 90s, where that was trash. But this one, Lakeith Stanfield, I think is his name. He's in it. And it's just, I think Jamie Lee Curtis is in it. It's funny. It's just a woman and her son. They kind of enlist this motley crew of spiritual advisors to get rid of the spirits in her house. It's just fun. I mean, honestly, I need to watch it again because it just felt like kind of like when you watch Hocus Pocus, like that sort of corny fun that was just like the whole family can watch it. And there's no real danger. You know, it's like it's thrilling and it's corny, but you know, you don't think anybody's going to die. At least they're not going to die horribly. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. I was not expecting anything. And I watched it and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. So it's a fun movie. So again, kind of in that realm of Hocus Pocus. And of course, it's a haunted mansion. So that's why I put it on this list. All right. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this. All right. So let me start with this one first. This is from 2023. The Fall of the House of Usher. It was on Netflix, written and directed by Mike Flanagan. I think it was 8 episodes. And this one, it was based on the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. So based on The Fall of the House of Usher, I think, I don't know if it was The Black Cat or anyway, it was based on a couple different stories and he kind of put them all together. And the premise is that their siblings, Roderick and Madeline Usher, who were in the book, they built a pharmaceutical company into an empire of wealth, privilege, and power. However, secrets come to light when the heirs to the Usher dynasty start dying. So I think I hyped myself up too much for this based on Flanagan's previous work. So this is not my favorite. I think that is still, my favorites are still The Haunting of Hill House. And then after that is Midnight Mass. But this is still pretty good. And again, since it centers around a house. And I'd say if you like Flanagan's other work, it's still really good. My only problem is that none of the protagonists were likable. And I just hated that, except for the gentleman. And I'm sorry, I don't know his name. I'm missing the actor's name, but he's like an insurance investigator who comes to talk to Roderick Usher, played by the great Michael Greenwood, I think is his name. Anyway, I'm not looking at my notes, but that character was good and it seemed like a noble person or person with morals. But everybody else, except for the granddaughter and that guy, I just didn't like them. So when they died, I was just like, so what? Okay, yeah, maybe they should have died. I don't know. They were just despicable people. So I think that was my main problem with that movie. So I just I need to have at least one character I can root for that's not despicable. So having a series for 8 hours where everybody's despicable, that's what didn't work for me. But it was well done, of course. Now let me jump backwards. The Haunting of Hill House, Netflix from 2018. This is a masterpiece. I mean, this series was the first time in a long time that I watched a series, and especially like a horror series. That was just amazing. All the pieces fit together. And basically, it's based on the novel by Shirley Jackson, and it follows siblings who, as children, they grow up, and they supposedly lived in that haunted house. Now, as adults, they're kind of trying to piece together their lives and the tragedy, and then that there's still some ghosts lurking around. And it was just a great series, just really, really wonderful. All right, now my absolute favorite, Crimson Peak from 2015, starring Tom Hiddleston, Mia Wasikowski, I can't say her name. And it is just an amazing movie. This was directed by Guillermo del Toro 2 years before he won a long-deserved Oscar for The Shape of Water. And this is a gothic romance. And what I love about it is that this one, if you want to see, as I've been talking about gothic genres and things like that, if you want to see a movie that has all the hallmarks of the gothic genre, this is the movie to watch. I mean, it's a great movie. And I don't want to give too much away, but I'll basically just give you the premise. After marrying the charming and seductive Sir Thomas Sharp, young Edith finds herself swept away to his remote gothic mansion in the English hills. And living there is his sister, Lady Lucille, and she's the protector of the family's dark secrets. And then Edith also, she's been able to communicate with the dead, the spirit of her dead mother and other dead folks since she was young. And basically the house is called Crimson Peak, and it's almost like the house is alive. I mean, I can't say enough about this movie. But what's interesting is that when I first watched it, I was like, oh, it's good, but I don't know. But then, excuse me, as I kept watching it and kept studying more about the Gothic, I realized, oh, this is exactly what a Gothic movie is supposed to be. And not just a Gothic movie, but it is firmly situated in the traditions of the Gothic romances. And then people like Shirley Jackson, the aforementioned Shirley Jackson and Daphne du Maurier, and other authors, that this is, there's a protagonist, usually a female protagonist, and she usually falls for some seductive stranger or person who could or could not be what they're saying. And then they're kind of isolated in a remote environment. Does any of this sound familiar? Because if you've seen anything about my Gothic tropes, it follows all these tropes to the letter. And if you watch the Blu-ray, there's extensive behind the scenes on this. And Guillermo del Toro, he references all these Gothic authors and all these Gothic stories. And he makes a distinction between Gothic horror and Gothic romance, because there is a central romance. I think that if it was just the horror in the story, then it would not be classified as Gothic romance. And I love this because I just wrote a Gothic romance, and that's kind of like my favorite genre. Coming out in February, by the way, called Reanimated Love. Total plug for myself. February 14th, Reanimated Love, coming to all your major retailers. Did I say again, Reanimated Love, coming February 14th? I want to put that on there. Anyway, but Crimson Peak is just the ultimate expression of a Gothic romance put to film with a suitable budget. So you can go back to movies like The Haunting. I think that was I want to say it was from 1960. And that is great and Gothic, and you never know whether the ghosts are real or not, but it was not a Gothic romance. So there's my list, and hopefully you like the list as well. And even if you don't like every movie on here, maybe just check them out and see what you think. But there's lots of other movies I could have put on here, but these are the ones that I didn't want to make the list too long, obviously, because it's already been a little bit. But maybe you can watch one or two of these before Halloween, which is in just a few days. So if I drop this today, or hopefully tomorrow, we'll see, and hopefully you can watch some of them. Anyway, take care. Thank you, friends, and talk to you in the next episode. Bye-bye.